What's up, everybody? Welcome. It is the second episode of the 2018 Occupy Fantasy Baseball podcast. Welcome back. It's been 2 weeks since our last episode. I am Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy. Now, if you tuned in to our first episode a couple of weeks ago, we talked about Bob's journey. My co-host, Bobby Tuggs, he's going to be out for the next couple of weeks. Bob's journey has taken a bit of an interesting turn. So when Bob gets back, he'll tell his story. And, we'll get more into that. But in the meantime, let's bring back a familiar face, the other co-founder of Occupy Fantasy. You saw him on the podcast last year, the NFL podcast. You've read his articles nearly every day on OccupyFantasy.com, the NHL Daily Plug. Walid, what's up, man? How's it going?
What's up, Ryan? How's it going? And if you heard that little drop, it's my phone that fell. I am recording on my mobile device, so bear with me here. But thanks for joining us, guys, whoever is listening.
Yeah, so welcome. So Walid, it's man, I don't know who's been hotter. Maybe in DFS for the last couple of weeks, you've been on an absolute heater in NHL, and then you step right into baseball and win a couple nice prizes. How's that transition been for you?
Well, sometimes you get lucky, right? No, but yeah, you get stretches where things kind of go right, and then you get stretches where things aren't feeling too well. So definitely enjoying riding this wave. But yeah, you got me into baseball a few years ago now. Time has flown by since you got me into DFS to begin with, and a lot of similarities to hockey in how the correlation plays out. We've made the whole pitcher and goaltender comparison before. If you botch that, it can really destroy a lineup. But, a lot of similarities. So the baseball transition, usually it takes time to kind of get back in the swing of things, but it certainly helps playing NHL every day.
Yeah, you're right. And we've talked about this many times. We talked about this on our initial baseball podcast last year. We made some comparisons in the Daily Plugs and certainly on the Periscopes. But yeah, with the stacking and the correlation with hitters and the importance of pitchers and, especially on FanDuel, and we talk about it tonight. We're recording this Monday evening in the MLB Daily Plug. Today, we talked about the importance of pitching, how even on a night where pitching is so awful, how important it is to really make sure you get the right guy. Like I said, especially on FanDuel, DraftKings is not as important as you have the two pitcher slots, but on FanDuel, you really only get one shot to get the guy that you need. So, the first couple of days, what kind of contests have you been playing? And, as we do this podcast, our goal really is to help players who are new to baseball, new to DFS, and even guys who have been around and gals that have been around. They, we want these people to help grow their bankroll. So what kind of contests you've been playing, and what has been your strategy so far as you ease into baseball?
Well, for the most part, I just read your plug, right? And do what you tell me to do. But yeah, I like to kind of keep it consistent across the board. I am big on anything that I can max out on, whether it's like a single entry tournament or a 3-max 100-player league. The point is, I don't want anyone else to have more entries in a given contest than I can myself. Now, I can't enter 150 lineups in these massive GPPs. I stay clear of those. Instead, I take all that money I'd spend on that and allocate it towards satellites of all sizes, $1, $2, $7, targeting, $44 tickets to $444 tickets. It's a strategy we both exercised in NHL, and you hit a big tournament in one that you had, like 10, 12 tickets to?
Right. Well, that first one, was only 7 tickets I had, but it goes to show that you only need one lineup in those big contests. And when you're earning these tickets, you're playing in GPPs that are above your bankroll, but you're not forcing those giant entry fees on your bankroll and depleting all the hard work you've done over the last couple of months or the last couple of years. So by getting these tickets into these higher contests, even a min cash can do significant wonders for your bankroll. One of our newer members this year for baseball won a $6 ticket on a $100 bankroll on the very first day of MLB's on opening day. And, so he's got that entry tonight, the $6 entry. And even if he min cashes a $12 prize, it doesn't seem like a lot for most people, but that's a 12% increase on his bankroll in the first weekend of the game. So, by getting these bigger tickets, and we're always going to preach satellite strategy. We talk about it in the Ultimate Guide, and it really is important. And we'll get to some member questions here later as we talk about backing up some of your entries with satellite entries. But it really is important, and that's the way to get into these GPPs with big prizes, not using your hard-earned money. Let me ask you this: you like to get into these GPPs with single entry or 3 max? What percentage of your contests or maybe slates that you play where you do actually enter a GPP without a ticket that has mass multi-entry? I can't imagine it's that high.
Honestly, I never only time I'll do it is if it is like an enormous slate, right? And like 10, 12 games where I know that, I can really differentiate my lineup without just doing something really wacky. And even then, it's if there's some overlay, which you do get from time to time in NHL. But look, I stay clear. Like I used to play it more often, and look, it's human nature to look at the prizes to say, hey, look, for $4, I can win potentially 10 grand. And hey, every other contest, a $5 league, the most I could win is $125. So, naturally, I think a lot of people are attracted to DFS because of the big prize. And just being aware of that, stopping it wasn't until a year ago did I feel like, okay, you know what? That inkling is gone. I don't even crave to get some of that action because I know the time will come. Like we've had every entry imaginable. We've entered $333 tickets. We had 10 of them in the last NHL end of the year tournament, and you'll get that action. I want to chase it in high percentage outcomes. I don't want to go for it knowing that if I finish top 1%, I just turned $4 into $50 because number 10 in a 8,000 person GPP, that's all they get. I wish they taught FanDuel, DraftKings, they did a little more it did a better job of kind of telling fans, hey, or players, hey, the top 1% makes 5 times the return. The top 0.5% to give people a much clearer idea, but it's tough, man. Some of these mass entry tournaments where some shark is going to have 150 lineups in, if you finish 5th out of 5,000, it's 1/20th the prize of if you finish first, and that's such a small margin.
Yeah, especially some of these MLB contests. Now, NHL was a little more balanced as the prize pools and the field sizes weren't as big. But now as we step into a bigger DFS sport, MLB way more popular. You and I, we see the interest on Twitter. So many more people are into MLB. It's a more popular sport. You and I would argue that that shouldn't be the case with the profitability in NHL.
Right.
But
fact, more people are into fantasy baseball, and for what it's worth, every year you get a ton of new players that I see it all the time. People, stacking against their pitchers, or people leaving guys in rain delays, or the field is larger, but once again, each field is relative to the contest you're playing. And for me, it's just a rule of thumb. If I can't max enter, I don't want anything to do with it.
That's fair. That's completely fair. And that's why we advocate for the leagues, the 100-player leagues on FanDuel, the 118-player leagues on DraftKings. You can enter 3 entries. That's the most anyone else can enter. And the prizes are tiered better. They're more spread out. For example, in the $6 ticket I alluded to earlier, now if you're entering the $6 GPP tonight, it's 50,000 entries on FanDuel for MLB. The top 20% cash, but that top 20%, you don't get to the next prize tier until you get the top 2%. This is a prize pool that I haven't seen in a while. So basically, if you finish the top 2% through the top 20%, you win the same prize 2 times your entry fee. If you finish in the top 2% of quintuple up,
just really think about that for a second.
2%, the top 2% gets twice their entry fee.
Yeah, and It's that kind of simple knowledge that really goes a long way. I think a lot of people, once again, they behave irrationally. I mean, look, there are some very calculated people that play DFS. Some are professionals. They make close to probably $1 million a year or what, yeah, hundreds and thousands of dollars. But then there's a huge pool of people that are like, they think that it starts and ends with picking the right players on a specific night. And hey, the marketing, the way they've kind of targeted, audience in DFS makes you think that's the case. But you learn quick. You learn the hard way if you think, hey, look, I can just throw out lineups in these mass entry GP. Give it a shot. I mean, if you have money to burn, try it out. Like, I can't blame you for being curious. Hey, what if I enter 25, lineups in this $4 GPP with 150 max? It's not a profitable strategy. And no matter how skilled you are or how great you are at predicting these outcomes.
Yeah, because you really have to be on the absolute right side of variance to even get into this top 0.5%, top 0.2% to really make some money. Like I said, so if you finish in the top 2% of this $6 GPP on FanDuel tonight, you get $12. However, if you enter a $2 100 player league and you finish in the top 2%, you get what, $25. So just a little over 12 times your entry fee. Especially for our audience, newer bankrolls, smaller bankrolls, getting to 12 times return on your investment is absolutely the way to go. And that's really where you should be spending most of your money. If you're playing these higher risk contests, you'll see in the daily plug we talk about every day, lower risk contests or higher risk contests. When we talk about higher risk contests, we're not really talking about these GPPs. We're talking about 100 player leagues,
right?
5 and 10 times multipliers, and we're talking about satellites. That's really the way to go.
Absolutely. And I try to be clear in every daily plug I write. Yeah, when we talk, those are the higher risk tournaments or higher risk contests. It is not ever like I said, rule of thumb. There's one thing you could take away from this right now is don't enter tournaments unless you can supply the max entry. If it's 3 max, if it's 5, look, right now I'm in this 330 or like 245 person NHL tournament. It's $33 entries, 7 max. I can put 7 lineups in that. That's great, right? If it was 20 max, I'm staying out of there, right? Because at that point, it doesn't kind of coincide with my bankroll. So just be self-aware, understand that it's natural to want to play these contests, but at the end of the day, you're burning money if you can't enter the max amount.
Yeah, and for those of you listening, Walid's he's max entering 7 entry, $33 entries because he's been on absolute heater the last month, and his bankroll has grown that much. But that's just to show that, as your bankroll grows, you're still playing a percentage of your bankroll. So you're not playing 10, 20, 30% of your bankroll risking on these contests. You're really being smart about your selection. So, obviously applaud you for that, for sticking to your bankroll and for growing your bankroll. And our members can learn a lot from that, and our listeners can learn a lot from that.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's fun. You kind of learn from your mistakes, and so much content online on Twitter. You see a lot of people. It's all like, sign up for our lineups, or we look at what our users did. They hit 10 times return, and they show the screenshots and all that. And I promise it. You're not the only one not winning if you're looking at those things and you're
right.
like, well, shit, like, who's losing like me? It's part of the process. Like, the key thing isn't, how much you win versus how much you lose. It's how much you hit when you win and how much you manage your bankroll on a day-to-day basis. So when you lose, you're not shooting yourself in the foot.
Yep, 100% right. And, I said that pretty much that exact sentence in a daily plug a couple of days ago. It's not how often you're right, especially in baseball and NHL when it's really volatile. It's not how often you're right. It's how much you win when you are right. So just remember that. And so, through these first couple of days, we've actually gotten quite a few questions from our followers on Twitter and our OccupyFantasy.com members. So let's throw out a couple of these questions and let's talk about this high level strategy. Now, this podcast, as we mentioned in our first episode, is not really going to be a slate breakdown. It's not going to be new rookies that were called up. We're really going to try to talk about high level strategy that you can listen to this podcast in a few days, maybe even in a few weeks, and take that strategy and apply it to your lineup. for that night. So Walid, let's look at this first question. And this was from one of our members Friday evening. He read the Daily Plug, and in the Daily Plug, I wrote about two different stacks. One was probably going to be high owned, and that was the Astros. And another was the Toronto Blue Jays, who was probably going to be low owned. And apparently that was for good reason. I think they scored 1 run. So that's irrelevant. His question was, should you use high owned or, projected to be high owned stacks in higher risk contests? And my answer to him was, it depends. I'll let you elaborate. What are your thoughts on using popular stacks or popular players in these higher risk contests?
Right. So, and pardon me for kind of using NHL. It's just the example right in front of me right now. So, and for those of you that aren't familiar with hockey, I'll try and keep it as general as possible. But right now there is a 6-game slate in the NHL, right? And the Toronto Maple Leafs, they were a minus 300 money line favorites, by far the largest favorites in the slate. They're playing one of the worst teams defensively, one of the worst teams in the league, period, the Buffalo Sabres, right? And, our ownership projections had, their first line, second line guys in that 15-25% range, right? Which is pretty massive. So, like, right away, I knew, and also their goalie was in that 35% range, right? So since I am going to have multiple lineups, I want exposure, right? I don't want to leave myself totally naked to that. But at the same time, I don't want to just throw out these cookie cutter lineups and build around, everything on Tampa. I had one contrarian line with Buffalo, which right now 3% own. They probably won't hit, but hey, look, Toronto can't play defense. Everyone's on Toronto. Buffalo's 3% owned. It's worth the shot, right? You don't need that team to even win for you to necessarily get profitable results. But for the most part, it depends on the contest, right? How many entries, how many people. If it's a situation where, look, I know that I have one entry or 3 at the most, and it's a larger pool, usually I'm going to try and do something to differentiate my high popular stack. That could mean a lower player that doesn't correlate directly. Like in NHL, it could be a winger from another line, a defenseman that, most people won't be on. It could be pairing, a lower line, or maybe in baseball terms, looking at the bottom of the batting order, right? Whereas most people will look at the 2, 3, 4, 5 batters. You might look at the 6, 7, 8 batters. But once again, it's such a hard thing for me to generalize, because it just depends how I feel about that stack that night relative to how I think other people are going to feel. If I'm just as excited or more excited about that popular play, I have no problem, rostering them in a higher risk contest. But if I feel like their ownership is a little inflated, 20, 30%, and I think it could be a great leverage play to go against the grain there, then I have absolutely no problem going against it.
No, you're totally right. And especially the part you're talking about differentiating on that stack. So if a stack is highly owned, like the Houston Astros on Friday, and we know that George Springer, Carlos Correa, Jose Altuve, Alex Bregman, these guys are going to be very, very popular. But we look at our Occupy model and we see that not only those guys, but guys like Evan Gattis or Jake Marisnick at the bottom of the order, Marwin Gonzalez, those guys are also highly projected, have high projected isolated powers or whatever it may be. Then that's a great way to take a step away from the high ownership and still get a piece of that implied team total, that line movement, the weather, whatever factors that were boosting that team up. And so that's one way. And I like the other way you talk about differentiating around that stat. You can still have those popular guys. If you're in a higher risk contest, a 100-player league, and our Occupy model just absolutely loves those top 4 hitters for the Astros, you can still play them in a higher risk contest because, sure, you're going to play those guys, but all you have to do is get some low-owned guys around them, whether it's a low-owned pitcher, whether it's another 4-team low-owned stack around them, or what I really like, what you do very well, is mini stacks around them, or just a different roster construction altogether, because most people, they know about stacking at this point, right? It's 2018. Right. DFS has been around for a while. Most people are going to double stack, especially in MLB. So if you don't double stack, you just get those 4 Astros hitters and you put 4 different batters around them, 2 mini stacks or whatever it may be, that automatically differentiates your lineup. while still having a higher own stack.
Right. And here's an example to kind of point out with, I think, Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton. You look at two guys that I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I imagine when one guy is owned, it's very likely the other guy is also in that lineup.
Yep.
And the reality is, sure, do they correlate? Because if Judge is on base and Stanton hits a home run, Judge gets a run. Yeah, right. But unlike hockey, where it's like, if you're on the same line, you can get an assist, a goal, like multiple assists, it kind of doubles down. The correlation isn't that extraordinary, where if you took, let's say, your 4,500 on Judge and spent that elsewhere, maybe, had a mini stack of Stanton and maybe one other player on the Yankees, all of a sudden, if Stanton was to hit 2 home runs like he did on opening day and Judge kind of doesn't necessarily deliver, which is most likely going to happen a lot of times. One of the guys has a big game. It's not like you're going to have both of them hit 2 home runs all the time, right? Or when they deliver. So, I think naturally people see it like, okay, how can I not, if I'm stacking the Yankees, how can I not get those 2 guys in? But a lot of times that's your key to differentiating.
Yep, that's a great point, especially with batters. Batters are so volatile. Like you said, most of the time they're not going to hit. So just understand that no matter how high a batter is ranked on a model, no matter how many home runs he hit yesterday, realize a batter is very unlikely to hit value most of the time. So if you're going to differentiate and go against a high-owned player or stack, you're better off to do it against a batter. Pitchers, most of the time, because they're more projectable, they have more events in a game. A pitcher is going to face 15, 20, 25 batters. So,
right.
You can project their outcome a little more. I'm more likely to go with a high-owned pitcher and then put a low-owned stack with them or whatever it may be. So that's the thoughts there. So for that member question, the answer is it depends. But yes, you can play high-owned stacks in higher risk contests. You just got to get creative. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, right now as I'm looking at this league that I'm in, it's 882 person, 5 max baseball tournament. And Carlos Correa just got hurt, or he's day to day. He has a little DTD marker now, and he's 49.2% owned. Jose Altuve, 45.3. So only 4% of folks that own Correa didn't own Altuve, right? Or I don't know if I said that right.
In general, I mean, maybe not 4%, but if you have one, you probably have the other.
Give or take. That's kind of a rough estimate there. So yeah, there you go. I mean, 2 incredible players. It makes sense why you'd want to stack them, but if you know already ahead of time that most people are going to stack those 2 because they're the 2 best, FanDuel players, DraftKings players on that team, picking one, spending your money elsewhere, it's a great way to differentiate.
Yep, completely true. Okay, let's go to this next member question. This actually came in today from a member who actually won a satellite ticket, and they haven't really used the satellite strategy in the past. They mostly play GPPs by themselves, or they play cash games or whatever it may be, but they won a ticket. They entered a satellite a couple days ago, won a ticket for an entry this week or next week, whatever it may be. And their question was, okay, so now I've won this ticket. I've created a lineup, or say I win 3 tickets, I create 3 lineups. Do I enter any other contest that night? Do I play other contests with that lineup? Do I make more lineups and enter contests? Wally, you and I have a very good plan usually when we have multiple GPP entries through satellites. But what are your thoughts? You say you have three entries to a GPP that you won through tickets. How else are you going to play those lineups, if at all, when that night comes?
So if I've already won those tickets, right, and once again, it really depends on kind of the contest, because the difference between a $9 tournament that you won and a $33 tournament and a $300 it's massive, right? Because if I'm in a $333 tournament, I'm thinking, you know what, if I just finish top 20%, that's not bad, right? That's pretty good. So I might be a little more risk averse there versus a situation where, hey, look, I like the opening day, what was it, the $9 super rally or something. like 10,000 people in it, right? So, in that, I just threw those out there, just created some higher risk lineups, crazy correlation, mini stacks. Didn't really use them in other contests because, to be honest, I didn't really see the point of playing a lineup designed for a 10,000 person contest in a 100-player contest, right? But for the most part, when it comes to creating my lineups, usually any lineup that I give exposure to in a higher risk contest, I'm going to put that lineup in a satellite. Like, that's just a personal rule of mine, a preference. Because as someone who chases tickets, like, I've had that feeling of when I win, a league, and I'm like, shit, I could have also won a $333
Yeah.
ticket. But to each their own. I think every player is different. Some people want to put that money into cash games, and tournaments aren't free. I'm sorry, satellites aren't free. They do add up. Like,
Yep.
you throw in, like, the NHL had a lot of 25-cent, 50-cent, $1 satellites, but in baseball you get a lot more of these $1, $2, $5, $7 satellites. So, me personally, if whatever my tournament allocation is for that, like, high, or we call it high risk contest allocation, is I'm spending 20-30% of it on satellites, and I'm going to try and get those lineups exposure into other leagues, and those leagues exposure into satellites. That's my personal rule of thumb.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. And you make a great point about the size of the GPP and especially the amount of the ticket entry. So, like you said, a $9 GPP entry is going to be worth way less, obviously, than a $333 entry because of how it relates to your bankroll size. So, if you're in a $333 entry and you have a smaller bankroll, a min cash can do wonders, right? And no matter what type of contest you would enter alongside that fits in your bankroll. So if you have a $200 bankroll and somehow you want to enter into a $333 contest, no type of contest that you enter with your $200 bankroll can match the returns of even a min cash in a $333 tournament. But now if you look at a $9 tournament, you min cash $18. There are a handful of different contests you can enter that can get you $18 or more, right? So what I like to do, if I can enter a contest that has similar risk reward. So let's say top 20% wins in a GPP, top 12% wins in a 100-player league on FanDuel. If I'm in a small dollar GPP, and what I do is normally I'll take whatever entries I have in there, I'll also put them in 100-player leagues. That way, if I get let's say top 2 or top 1% in my 100-player league, I'm going to make more money in that than I will with my 3 or 4 times cash in that GPP. So it depends on your bankroll. If you can enter a contest that will earn you more than the min or the top, 10, 5%, then that's when I back it up. But like you, as a rule of thumb, especially if I have GPP ticket entries, if I'm making high risk lineups, I'm also throwing those in the appropriate satellites because that's the days where you and I get excited, and you as a DFS player should get excited because you're not trying to win GPPs every single day. You're waiting for these big ticket satellite days. So once those days come around, once or twice a month, that's really when you're excited, and that's when you can win the big money.
You got to pick your spots, right? And I know it sounds like to some people, like, I'm willing to bet. I don't play NBA, but I see how some people kind of post their experience and screenshots. I'm willing to bet there's a lot of people that every night they're playing high risk contests, and not high risk in the way that we define it, but like literally, top 1% make 4 or 5 times of return. So, it's just not the way to try it. Like, hey, look, don't let us stop you. Try it. Maybe you might hit, and you're laughing at us. Good for you. But 99% of the time, you're going to realize this isn't profitable. It's not sustainable. You're just shooting darts in the dark. And when it comes to satellites, what you're able to also do is really commit to it, like make it a plan of attack, like identify a tournament. Like right now, I have 3 tickets to that $44. I forgot what it's called.
I think it's the enormous Grand Slam, right, on FanDuel.
Right. And I was targeting a few. I hit a few on this one. Now I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm going to focus on getting more tickets to this. And as it gets closer and closer, you might see that, how I say usually 20-30% of my like contest will go towards that. You might see it get to 50-60%. We saw that with NHL with the end of the season tournament. By the last week, all we were doing is playing
Right.
satellites. Like I'd rather take the time, make, as many entries as I can for that, versus playing other contests. So it'll come full circle. You'll get that opportunity once that tournament approaches. All that money that you thought you could have won in those previous days by not playing those higher risk contests, they'll be right in front of you, and you'll actually be able to enter more entries versus have one or two, and you're playing it. It's a numbers game.
Yep. And yeah, I love that strategy of targeting GPPs, especially once you win one ticket. Once you get that one ticket, then you want to start targeting that contest. If you enter a
Yeah.
high risk lineup, try to, if as long as your bankroll allows, obviously don't go over that 4 to 5% mark on a daily basis. But bankroll's a little bit bigger, and you can afford that extra $1 entry into a satellite of the same GPP. You really want to try to get multiple tickets. That way, it just gives you
Right.
multiple shots in that same contest.
And one more thing I did want to say, because one of my tickets I got was actually because I found overlay on a night slate. It was like one of these, like it was like a $7 entry, but I think it was like 7 people or 8 people, and
Mhm.
only 5 people were in it. So
No.
automatically my odds went up almost, like not by 50%, but almost. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of times when people play the late night slate, or they play like, hey, the evening, the 10:30, it's because maybe they just lost the main slate and they're like, I
Yeah.
want to get
Yeah.
more action. And these people aren't usually looking to play satellites. These aren't the people that are calculated in their approach. They're not.
Yep.
They don't necessarily even have a plan. They're just looking for the next contest to enter. And that's the key. Is like, I think the more you play, the more you realize that on any given night, look, either of us could look like the smartest person in the world or the dumbest person in the world. Like, we've had nights where we just laugh at like, of course this, like, we'll be into one lineup or like, one stack, and then we'll like watch the exact opposite's going to happen, and then what we
It happens.
and then it happens, and then we're like, we're idiots, we don't know anything, right? But the reality is, like, you'll have your days, you'll have great days, you'll have bad days. But if you don't have a bigger picture plan, kind of a strategy that you're uh, holding on to in principle, not just saying last second screw it, or I lost or I won big. Sometimes people win and they're like, you know what, that motivates them to play more money and go outside their bankroll. So the key thing is to really understand the bigger picture of it. Like, if you don't get that and you're just playing DFS on a slate to slate basis, you're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to be competing for the right prizes.
Yep, 100%. And talking about the satellites, that's why we put that range in our bankroll recommendations in our daily plugs. Both NHL and MLB will say 2 to 3% tonight, or 3 to 4% tonight. We want you to save that extra 1% for overlay,
Yeah.
especially on the non-main slates. Early afternoon, early late night. A lot of times, especially those satellites, they don't fill to 100%. You can get some of these satellites 50, 60, 70% filled,
Mm-hmm.
and that just gives you that extra chance of earning
Right.
that ticket. So, Walid, let's get out of here. Well, I think
There's
we
one
have
thing I want to make, one more point, and I,
okay.
you know what, whoever tweets at us saying that they did this and sends us a screenshot, we'll give him, we'll hook him up with like a free membership or something, because this is something that no one, like, people just don't take the time to do, right? Find a 150 max GPP, right? And then find a 3 max tournament. And then look at the prize pool, pull up the prize pool, and I want you to find out what the top 1% makes from that GPP, which has 150 max and maybe 8,000 people, and then compare it to what that 3 max or that league has. And then do it for the top 2%, and then do it for the top 3%, right? And try to conceptualize it. Okay, a top 3% finish in a 100-player league is finishing third. It's not that hard. We'll do that often if you play enough. What's a top 3% in a 8,000 or 10,000 person GPP, where there's some people that have 150 entries? Look it up. Just like, take the time, figure it out. Because once you see it, I think some people are more visual, and for me, like, I would send you spreadsheets like, hey, look, compare this contest to this contest. If you finish in the top 5% here, you're making 5 times the payout if you finish in the top 5% in this contest.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's so powerful. And the fact that people don't think like that is a shame. It really is. Like the fact that people are going to spend 30 minutes trying to decide whether they go with Robbie Ray or some other pitcher, which, hey, at the end of the day, either one could be right. We don't know. We don't have a crystal ball. We look at all the indicators and all the key performance metrics and try and project it. But hey, we don't have a crystal ball. But something like this can be so evident as to how you play your contests, how you target certain ones, and how you stay away from others.
Yeah, just incredible points. Yeah, we don't know what's going to happen. We have a good idea of what's going to happen on tonight's slate, but we for damn sure know how much a contest is paying out, right? That's something you can absolutely see, and you don't have to predict it. It's facts that you can see in front of your eyes. So great points there. Now, real quick, before we get out of here, I just want to ask your opinion, Walid, for new members or new listeners who they just got an Occupy Fantasy membership and they're trying to get into MLB. What would be real quick your suggestions on how they can get acclimated quickly and what they should start doing? Let's just say they bought a membership tonight and they want to get started tomorrow. Real quick, what would you say to them how they should use OccupyFantasy.com?
Well, first of all, the daily plug is really your guide, right? And you do a great job with that, covering it from the top down. Like, let's look at the line movement. Let's look at which teams are in great positions. Let's look at who gets a weather boost. Let's look at which teams' lineups are stacked against maybe you get some good lefties going against a righty or vice versa. So the daily plug, it really is your roadmap. It will tell you how many lineups you should build, which stacks you should target in higher risk contests, which ones you should utilize in cash games. So that right there is a powerful tool in itself. But if you want to kind of start creating your own process, because a lot of times I think part of the fun is doing your own research, right? Using the model, being able to kind of pick up on things. I hate lineup providers. I hate the fact that the industry is full of it. And it's just so ugly and so fake. And I guarantee you 99% of these people aren't winning. But my point is, if you wanted to kind of legitimize your own process, first thing I start with, period, is Vegas. Look at the betting odds. Get an idea of who's favored. Get an idea of what the ownership projections are like. Where's the line movement? Who are people betting on, right? That's another thing. Where are the sharp bets coming in? You can look at the money line and see, hey, we have it. It's right on the Occupy tab. How much percent of the bets are coming in on this team? And then you get a good idea of where teams stand, right? Relative to the slate. Then, find the value. Find a few batters that have great ISO that you think will be in sneaky spots, whether they're batting higher up in the lineup, have a great matchup, great weather conditions. Start jotting them down, right? What I do it the old-fashioned way. I get the model out on one screen. I got the notepad out on the other screen. I write out the teams I like. I write out the value players I like. I find the the stacks I like, the pitchers I like, and then that's kind of how I start constructing my lineups.
Yeah, I mean, just all incredible advice, and I'm going to use an example from tonight in the daily plug of how you can use the model to predict ownership, really. And so we looked at two stacks that were likely going to be very high owned tonight: the Toronto Blue Jays and the Houston Astros. And to no surprise, once the lineup's locked and we saw ownership, these guys were 30, 40, 50% in cash games. So we were right on the mark. And how we were able to know that is just looking at the pitcher tab in the dashboard in our Occupy model. And then looking at the stack dashboard, we saw that the Houston Astros and the Toronto Blue Jays were highly projected by our model. Number one, that's obviously a great sign. Number two, we saw that many people were betting these two teams. You look at the pitcher tab, you see the money line percentage. Houston was getting 81% of the bets at the sportsbook that we use to tabulate money line percentages. Toronto was getting 68% of the bets. These are both massive public bets, right? That many people are betting. Okay, we look at their team totals in the stack dashboard. They were number one and number two in implied team total. Both these teams were projected by Vegas, who wagers billions of dollars every year on if their lines are right. High stacks, right? High implied team totals. And then we look at the line movement. Not only was their team totals already high, they moved even higher. So we have all these 4 factors coming in. We know that these teams are in good spots, and we know that a lot of other people know these teams are in good spots. So we want those high percentage plays, those high projected plays in our lower risk lineups, our 50-50s, double ups, head to heads. And that's how it ended up playing out tonight. Whether or not we're correct and whether or not it plays out that way, we know we were on the right side of things. That's really how you should be thinking about how to play MLB DFS.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, like, just like in baseball, like, you know, Trout, Bryce, like, they could go 0 for 4. You might have days where you do everything right, but you get unlucky. But the process is what's important, and more times than not, like, if you kind of zone in on the key performance indicators, you'll turn out on top.
Got that right. So, all right, let's wrap it up. We've been here. We've talked through some good strategy, answered some member questions. If you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter at Occupy Fantasy. Shoot us an email, info@occupyfantasy.com. Reach out to one of us on Twitter. Lead is at PC_lead. I'm at Brian Jester FF. Certainly reach out to us. We love member questions. We love seeing you succeed, and we want to help you as much as we can. So definitely do that. Go subscribe to the podcast. If you liked what we talked about today, subscribe on iTunes, subscribe on Stitcher, tune in, whatever it may be. Get our latest episodes. We're going to do this once a week. Walid did a great job filling in for Bob. He'll be back when he's ready. So let's see. Anything else we want to talk about? Oh, yeah, the giveaway. We're doing a membership giveaway every single week. All you have to do is leave a review, iTunes, Stitcher, whatever it is. Leave a review. Let us know. Send us a tweet. Send us an email. Say, hey, I left a review. And we'll pick a premium membership winner, monthly premium membership winner every single week. Just leave a review that helps other people know how much you liked our podcast. So, Walid, any closing thoughts?
That's it. It's a long season ahead, and it doesn't stop.
Got that right. All right, occupyfantasy.com is where you can find everything. For Walid, I'm Brian. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Take care, guys.